It was the most sensational murder case of the early 19th century, with the discovery of the body of Maria Marten in the Red Barn revealed through a nightmare. The man hanged for her murder was William Corder, a name that lives in infamy in the annals of British crime. But did he really kill Maria?
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Did he shoot her dead, as his so-called confession stated? Or did she, as Corder said in court, kill herself? Or was she murdered by someone else?
So whether he went there intending to kill her, I think, is another question.
If it were not a true story, it would make for a classic bodice ripper, featuring wealthy suitors, prostitutes, smugglers, a body impaled in its grave, a tragedy of lies, sex and nightmares, with one or two ghosts thrown in for good measure.
I don't think that we can point a finger at poor Corder.
Did William Corder take the fall for someone else? Or was this really the strange case of a murder revealed in a nightmare? Polstead, a village in the English county of Suffolk, easily missed by anyone travelling the A17012 to or from Ipswich. People rarely travel through Polstead, it doesn't lead to or from anywhere. Visitors to the village are invariably drawn to St Mary's Church to enjoy pastoral views across rolling Suffolk countryside. Which is what brought me here 30 years ago when I first moved to Suffolk. I discovered a murder mystery which as an author fascinated me and as a human being touched me, and still does. Maria Marten of Polstead was murdered in 1827 and buried here. But you won't find her grave. Her tombstone has gone, chipped away by ghoulish souvenir hunters. The only thing that reveals Maria lies somewhere within the grounds is this wooden plaque. Near this place lie the remains of Maria Marten. The sad irony is that had Maria not been murdered, there would be nothing at all in the 21st century to remind us that she had ever existed in the early 19th century. In this cottage in Polstead, Maria Marten was born on the 24th of July, 1801. The house has been much extended since it was the home of mole-catcher Thomas Marten in the early 19th century. Then it was a small, very basic house with walls of daub and wattle. Thomas struggled to feed his family on his meagre income, so when Maria was just 7, he put her into service to the vicar of Leham. Seeing the poor state Maria had arrived in, the vicar put her into a dress which his own daughter had grown out of. He also taught her to read and write, and always made sure she was well dressed while in his home. Ironically, her dreams and ultimately her tragic end were, in part, shaped by his acts of benevolence. She worked for the vicar into her early teens until her mother died, but it seems she was also dismissed for
lewdness of behaviour and an inordinate love of fine clothes.
Maria had 4 younger siblings to care for, but she took every opportunity to be out and about flirting with the young men of the village.
Maria, where are you?
Thomas married again to Anne, an attractive woman only a year older than Maria. Thomas needed a wife to be mother to his children, and Anne needed a husband. But why a poor and much older man? Was Anne's disposition such that no younger man would have her? The local gossips must have had a field day, but it soon became clear that Maria and her stepmother could not live easily under one roof.
It's for me to decide what the children should wear.
And you should all make them look like they are rag dolls.
They should wear the clothes we can afford.
You ain't their mother.
I am your father's wife.
And young enough to be his daughter.
Oh, so now we know the truth. The eldest daughter is jealous.
You think too much of yourself.
And you think too much of fine dresses and a good time with boys, instead of taking your responsibilities at home seriously.
If you dressed yourself to be attractive, you might have landed yourself an handsome young man.
I think you need to get yourself married.
I will. And when I do, it will be with a man of an higher station than you can even dream of.
Will you two cease yelling?
Thomas, you must tell your daughter that I am now a mother and the woman of this household.
Maria, you must respect your stepmother.
Yes, Father.
Take yourself into the garden and tend to it. That'll cool your temper.
You won't need your finery for that.
Your stepmother's right. Go and change.
Maria and I cannot live under one roof.
Then you'll have to learn to do so.
There's a tale told in Polstead which might be true. They say that Maria was working in the garden one day when a gypsy came by the house and told Maria her fortune. she had good news
You will have many lovers. Look for a man on a grey horse. His future is bound in yours.
and bad news.
This line, it tells me that you will not live to old age.
Despite this dire prediction of an early death, Maria set her hopes on the arrival of the man on a grey horse, if the story is true. Either way, it's a good story. But she didn't waste time waiting for the man on the grey horse and gained a reputation as a flirt and a tease and was fancied by many of the local lads, including Thomas Corder. He was one of 6 children, 4 sons and 2 daughters, of John Corder, a wealthy Polstead farmer. Thomas was his father's favourite son and chief inheritor of the 300-acre holding, which made him quite a catch. Maria, flattered, allowed him to lead her into one of his fields. He intended to take advantage of her as yet unfounded reputation for promiscuity. She must have believed this was the way she might become his wife, so despite his coarse attempt to seduce her, she gave in to his fumblings. She was 18 when she lost her virginity to Thomas Corder. They continued to meet in secret, but she soon learned that he had no intention of marrying her when she broke the news to him that she was pregnant.
Does your father know?
How could I hide it from him? He thinks me loose. My stepmother disapproves of me. But if we were wed...
My father will never allow it.
But if we explain to him...
Explain? Explain what? He's a strict Christian. He will never forgive me for bringing the family into disrepute.
Well, what am I to do?
I will provide for you and the child. You need have no worry on that score, but my father must never know. You must promise me in this.
I promise.
After the child was born, it quickly died and was hurriedly buried at St Mary's Church. Thomas Corder stopped seeing Maria. But she didn't dwell on the loss of her lover or the baby, or the disapproval of her father and stepmother. And if she did pay attention to the local gossip about her, she soon forgot it all when into her life rode a man on a grey horse. His name was Peter Matthews. She could see by his bearing that he was a man of means, and though he was at least twice her age, he saw in her eyes an invitation which he accepted without hesitation. Within hours and at his expense, they were making love in a room in a hotel in Ipswich. This was the most exciting and fulfilling love affair of Maria's life. Enchanted by her beauty and naivete, Matthews bought her clothes and presented her to London society. The affair ended when she returned home, pregnant with Peter Matthews' child. She also returned with the first of a regular income from Matthews of £5 a quarter to care for herself and the child, and so Maria was welcomed home to have her baby. The child, a boy called Thomas Henry, was born at the Marten home. But Maria shunned her maternal duties and spent much time in London, Ipswich and Bury St Edmunds with lovers who bought her fine clothes, giving rise to the gossip in Polstead that she was little more than a prostitute. Her fast life would stop when she met and fell for another of John Corder's sons, William. He wanted to become famous as a writer, but instead became infamous for Maria's murder. William Corder was born here at the family home in 1803. He was an unpopular child in the village and was even disliked by his father. William was academically gifted and educated at a private school in nearby Hadley, with aspirations to be a writer or a teacher. But his father had no such ambitions for his least popular son. He took William out of school when he was 16 and forced him to work on the farm. William escaped this drudgery by spending his evenings at the Cock Inn. This is the Cock Inn in Polstead today, but this isn't the original Cock Inn. This building next door, Cock Farm, was the original Cock Inn where William spent many hours carousing. When Squire Corder heard of his son's wild ways, he sent him to enlist in the Merchant Navy. But William, just 22 years of age, was rejected because of his bad eyesight. Instead of going home, he went to London to become a writer. And while drinking alone, first set eyes on a dancer who called herself Hannah Fandango. She was the daughter of a sea captain, and her mother was of Creole descent, blessing Hannah with exotic looks which men found potent. She had fled boarding school at the age of 14 and arrived in London in the hope of becoming an actress, but instead became a dancer and a mistress to wealthy playboys and eventually turned to prostitution and crime. She was known to painter and writer Thomas Wainwright, who, during his 10-year prison sentence in Australia for forgery, recalled,
"She was a dancer I often painted. An astonishing creature. Delightful but wicked. seductive but unscrupulous, who lived like some medieval adventuress, a Lucretia Borgia of the stews.
William very quickly fell hopelessly in love with her.
He was introduced to me by Hannah Fandango. He came from the Suffolk countryside, a stooping youth with Napoleonic gestures and a sense of drama. I think he wanted to dramatise himself. He wanted to write, but he was, shall we say, more a satyr than a satirist, fonder of works than they were of him.
Hannah introduced him to Samuel Beauty Smith, with whom she was involved in smuggling contraband goods from Europe. Smith taught William how to cheat at cards and, although it was never proven, William might have gained funds through forgery.
On the subject of forgery, I may not be entirely guiltless of having implanted some ideas in Corder's mind. He often complained how his father kept him short of funds, and I explained how very easy it was to forge cheques and remain undetected for a considerable period.
He spent all his money trying to keep Hannah happy, but her infidelities and his money problems brought him back to Polstead in April 1824. The squire's prodigal son was allowed back into the family home on the condition he worked on the land, abstained from drinking, and attended church every Sunday. William went to church, worked hard on the land, and read the Bible during the little spare time he had. He was a reformed character. And just as well, because his father suddenly died in December 1825, while brothers John and James both fell ill with tuberculosis, leaving Thomas and William to run the farm. One morning in the spring of 1826, Maria, recently returned from a winter vacation in London, was tending the family garden when William passed by on his way to work. He was instantly attracted to this village beauty with a dubious reputation. Solicitor and resident of Polstead, Lisa Wordley, has studied the Red Barn murder.
And he was obviously fairly well to do, or at least more so than Maria, because she saw him as a sort of an opportunity.
They began taking long evening walks to avoid being seen, keeping their romance a secret from their families for several months. For their more intimate moments, William took her to the Red Barn, which had a roof that was almost entirely thatched except for a small section made up of red tiles. They made love on a bed of straw in the barn said by some to turn blood red from the rays of the setting sun, and which before long would run red with Maria's blood. In the Suffolk village of Polstead in the early 19th century, a poor village girl, Maria Marten, began a love affair with William Corder, son of a well-to-do farmer. William had previously experienced a taste of the high life in London with Byron's portrait painter Thomas Wainwright and smuggler, pimp and card sharp Samuel Smith.
If he was a literary man, perhaps he was influenced by a sort of Byronic influence at the time. So perhaps he yearned for adventure. He wanted the romantic life.
Maria too had enjoyed a brief escape from the drudgery of her poor village existence, and she now hoped that William would be her ticket to further romance and adventure. In a sense, William and Maria were kindred spirits, both yearning for a life of romance and adventure. But the romantic life ended abruptly in the autumn of 1826 when Maria delivered bad news.
Pregnant?
And now you will abandon me.
No, I will not. I will talk to your parents.
William was as good as his word.
With child? Again?
And boy another quarter.
Wife.
I understand your concerns, but I'm not my brother.
We'll all be shamed by the scandal.
I hope not, Mrs. Martin. All I hope for now is to keep the news of the child from my brother and my mother.
More secrets.
Not secrets, but discretion. For now, all will see that I and Maria are together. I shall be happy to be seen out with Maria, and I shall arrange for her to stay in Sudbury, where she can have the baby.
William seemed sincere and made sure he was seen in public with Maria for the benefit of the most ardent village gossips. Maria might have thought her problems were over, but trouble was not far behind.
What exactly is this? This letter from the solicitor, Peter Matthews.
I can explain. You see, I found myself in a bit of difficulty, and I happened upon one of the quarterly payments you received from Peter Matthews. I fully intended to make restitution, But after you inquired of him where the latest payment was, he instructed a solicitor to investigate, and I was discovered. If I'm arrested and found guilty, I'll be imprisoned. At worst sent to Australia, never to see you or to see the child.
What can we do?
Just tell Peter Matthews it was a mistake, that the money had simply gone astray, but now you found it.
Yes, I will. When we marry, our problems will be over.
Let us see that the baby is born first, and then...
There were further troubles to come when, in February 1827, Thomas Corder fell through ice in his horse and cart and drowned. The burden of running the family farm now landed on William's unwilling shoulders. On the 19th of March 1827, William installed Maria in lodgings in Plough Lane in Sudbury, where, in the second week of April, she gave birth. She and the baby returned home on the 16th of April, both in poor health.
How are they today?
Maria is better in body.
The child?
Has died.
Now will you do right by my daughter?
I can do nothing just now, except bury the child. We'll take the tiny body to Sudbury for burial.
But the child, whose gender was never revealed, was not buried in Sudbury. With the tiny corpse inside a box, Maria and William buried their child in a field believed to be near Polstead, the secret grave never to be found. Not long after this sad event, William's old friends Hannah Fandango and Samuel Beauty Smith arrived in Polstead to conduct their nefarious business. After hearing of William's carousing, Thomas Marten again pressed William to marry his daughter.
I intend to marry her, and quickly, for I've heard the local constable has a warrant for Maria's arrest for bearing children out of wedlock.
I always knew it had come to this.
Quiet, wife. William, what do you plan?
Tomorrow's Monday. I'll get a licence to marry Maria, and we'll be wed in Ipswich.
Unfortunately, William's brother James became dangerously ill again, so William was detained. It was not until Friday when he arrived with the licence.
Come, Maria, make haste, we're going.
How am I supposed to go at this time of day without anybody seeing me?
You've been disappointed so many times, but shall not be again. We'll go now to Ipswich.
How am I to go, William?
Go to the Red Barn and wait till I come to you with my horse and gig.
Anne would later say in court,
It was as though they had a previous arrangement, so that Maria could go to the barn dressed in men's clothing as a disguise, which was already bundled. Once in the barn, William would give her a bundle of her own clothes to dress in, and they too were already packed.
I am not ready. How am I to take my things?
I'll put your things in a bag and carry them to the barn, and then I'll come back and walk with you. None of my workmen are about in the fields or near the barn. The coast is quite clear.
Oh, how he had an answer to every objection Maria had. And as for Thomas and I, who were we to object to Will, the new squire? Maria began to dress in the men's clothing, crying at the suddenness being forced upon her. When she was ready, he returned with a small pistol, which he said was loaded.
Don't be uneasy. Maria shall be my lawful wife before I return home.
Anne would emphasise the presence of the gun as if it had a truly malevolent purpose, but this might not have been the case.
If he was walking around with a gun, well, I suppose in those days, if you were going to travel to Ipswich from here, you might have taken a gun with you as protection on the way because the roads weren't safe. So perhaps that doesn't really reflect on his character.
They left stealthily through different doors, and I watched them meet in the road and walk across Harehill Field in the direction of the Red Barn, until Maria, in tears, and her sullen lover disappeared into the distance. It was the last time I saw Maria alive.
Considering Anne neither liked nor loved Maria, she suddenly displayed uncharacteristic concern for her. Anne claimed that the following Monday morning, William arrived at her cottage at 9 o'clock after Thomas had left for work.
Where is Maria?
I've left her at Ipswich in a comfortable place. She's with Miss Rowland, the sister and old school friend of mine.
Anne later said she was most unhappy with William's explanation and told him so. Anne claimed that over the following weeks she sometimes saw William on the Corder farm and that he always insisted Maria was living happily in Ipswich.
We've not even had a letter from Maria.
I fear Maria's far too busy preparing for our marriage to write.
Don't pester the squire, wife. If anything were amiss with Maria, he'd tell us.
Not long after this, William's brothers, John and James, died from tuberculosis and typhus, leaving William the head of the family and his mother a broken old woman. The villagers were sympathetic toward William for his loss and were unconcerned about Maria's ongoing absence. After all, she was known to disappear from Polstead at times. Anne claimed that in the autumn she again pressed William for news of Maria.
I assure you she is well, except for her right hand being stiff and painful, which prevents her from writing. So she asked me to pass on her apologies for the lack of letters.
Well, you seem to avoid coming to the cottage. Thomas wonders why he hardly sees you.
I promise I'll come more often.
And bring news of Maria. Letters would be better.
But did Anne Marten report such conversations truthfully? Or did she in fact already know that Maria was lying dead in a shallow grave in the Red Barn? On the 18th of May 1827, Maria Marten and William Corder set out to marry in secret, going first to the Red Barn with Maria disguised in men's clothing. The person who saw them leave the Marten cottage and head for the Red Barn was Maria's stepmother, Anne Marten, who later claimed that whenever she met William, invariably alone, he told her that Maria was happy and well in Ipswich. Thomas bought the story, but did Anne know the truth behind William's lie?
Maria asked me to pass on her love, and she wishes the family well.
I prefer she did so in person.
Are you sick?
Just worn out by the work I now have to do on the farm. And the travelling to and from Maria and Ipswich. It has all taken its toll. And I'm afraid that if I do not take care of myself, I'll join my poor brothers.
Yes, well, you must take care.
To that end, I'm leaving Polstead for a while, to recuperate at a health spa. After which, I'll rejoin Maria, and we will marry. Then we'll both return to Polstead as man and wife.
Well, I'll drink to that.
Indeed.
William left Polstead on the 8th of September. On the 18th of September, Thomas Marten received a letter which William had written from the Bull Inn in Leadenhall Street in London.
I am just arrived at London upon business, and I'm writing to you before I take refreshment. My stay in town will be short, anxious to return again to her who is now my wife, and with whom I shall be the happiest of men. I should have had her with me, but it was her wish to stay at our lodging at Newport on the Isle of Wight, which she described to you in her letter, although we are astonished that you have not yet answered it.
So it says here Maria's written to us.
In her letter, she gave you a full description of our marriage, that Mr. Rowland gave Maria away, and Miss Rowland was the bridesmaid. After Maria and myself went on to the Isle of Wight, I told Maria I should write to you directly I reached London. I now plan to buy a farm on the Isle of Wight for you. After I send directions for you, I think you should burn all letters so that nobody may form the least idea of our residence.
We were both overjoyed at the news of your wedding, but we have received no letters from Maria.
It is, I think, very odd that letters should be lost in this strange way. Was it not for the discovery of our residence, I would certainly indict the post office.
I think, Anne, that this letter, and all the Corder's letters, are nothing but a pack of lies.
There were no more letters from William Corder, who never did set foot on the Isle of Wight. He remained in London at the Bull Inn in Leadenhall Street, from where in November he placed ads in the Morning Herald and the Sunday Times.
Matrimony. Private gentleman, aged 24, entirely independent. To any female of respectability.
Around 100 ladies replied, from which he chose to meet Mary Moore at her home in Gray's Inn Terrace, where she lived with her mother and brother.
I recently worked as a governess for a British family in France, but now I've returned home to start my own school for young children.
As for myself, I've recently lost my father, and discord has arisen between those who survive him, under circumstances too disagreeable to relate. But it has left me affluent.
After their second meeting, William proposed marriage, and she accepted. They were married in Holborn in London that December, and then moved to Brentford. They would visit Thomas Wainwright whenever he came to stay in nearby Turnham Green.
They seemed to be living an idyllic existence. Corder was inordinately fond of her and was forever praising her virtues, squeezing her hand and whispering endearments to her. He loved showing her off. She played the piano, sketched a little, nothing remarkable, though her draftsmanship was good, and spoke admirable French.
Mary opened a boarding school in Brentwood, and there William began his career as a teacher. But during the early months of 1828, he began to worry that his idyllic existence might end, as Mary later recalled.
He began to behave like a frightened man. He hardly went out. His sleep was disturbed and restless, and he suffered from nightmares.
Ah!
One night, his shouts were so loud, it awoke the children of our boarding school and terrified them.
William was not the only one suffering nightmares. Just a few days after William married Mary, news which somehow reached only the ears of Anne, she began to have disturbed nights which, almost a year after Maria disappeared, intensified into dreams of terror.
My God, woman!
Oh, she comes!
Not again!
Mariah comes! Knock, knock, knocking at the door!
There's no one there!
What's that?
Just my daughter, Anne. Back to bed, daughter. Just your stepmother had a bad dream.
She wakes us all. Again. She's going queer. She says Mariah's coming for her, knock, knock, knocking at the door, shouting for her. They ought to lock her up.
On the 19th of April 1828, Anne, unable to bear the nightmares any longer, delivered startling news to Thomas.
Last night I dreamt Mariah was murdered in the Red Barn.
Look, I worry too that we've heard nothing since before Christmas, but, well, your worry just makes your mind wander.
You must go look. Take someone if you will not go alone.
If it will bring us any peace, I'll ask William Pryke, Mr. Corder's bailiff. He'll let me into the barn if I tell him Mariah's left some clothes in there.
Look under the furthest bay in the right-hand corner.
Anne Marten knew exactly where the body of Maria was buried. Later, in court, Thomas related how he found his daughter's body.
I searched the barn on the 19th of April. We poked down in the straw and finding the straw thick, we cleared it with a rake. I thought the earth had been disturbed. We spiked down and turned up something like flesh, bits of flesh on the end of the spike. I smelt it, and it was flesh. We cleared part of the earth away until we came to a body. We cleared towards the head, and there found a handkerchief which appeared to be tied tight around the neck. We cleared part of the earth towards the feet. I saw a spike had been driven through the body about the hip bone. When we turned the body up, that was my daughter, Maria.
The coroner declared that Maria had been murdered, and the name of William Corder quickly came to the fore. The case against Corder seemed open and shut. But today, if you ask residents of Polstead, many of whom know as much, if not more, than historians about the Red Barn murder, if Corder alone killed Maria, you find a fairly even division in opinion.
No.
Definitely.
No. Yes.
No.
Yes.
Events moved swiftly, and a London detective, James Lee, quickly traced William to Brentwood and arrested him at his house, just as Corder was boiling eggs for two female guests. William was immediately transported to Polstead to appear before the coroner at the Cock Inn and committed for trial. The next day he was sent to Bury St Edmunds Jail. Its facade still stands, a reminder in the 21st century of the most sensational murder case of the early 19th century. Maria Marten was buried at St Mary's Church on the 20th of April 1828. Hundreds came to the funeral, having heard about the sensational murder in the Red Barn. The case came to trial at Shire Hall in Bury St Edmunds on the 7th of August. Crowds queued from 6 in the morning for a seat inside the court, which was, as one newspaper reported, crowded to suffocation. The charges were read out that Corder had mortally wounded Maria with a pistol shot, that he had stabbed her between the 5th and 6th rib, that he had wounded her with a sword on the right side of her face and on the right side of her neck, that he choked and strangled her with a handkerchief, and that he finally suffocated her in her shallow grave. Then Corder was asked if he was guilty or not guilty.
Not guilty, my lord.
The trial lasted just 2 days. The witnesses included William Pryke, who testified that Corder had ordered him to keep the barn locked and only opened it when Thomas Marten asked to be allowed inside. And Peter Matthews also had his say. I sent money every quarter for the upkeep of the child, but one such payment went missing, stolen by William Corder. But these witnesses were just the supporting cast in a tragic melodrama that was reported in every lurid detail in all the newspapers. The star witness was Anne Marten. William Corder stood trial for the murder of Maria Marten in August 1828. The star witness was Maria's stepmother, Anne Marten.
I saw that Corder had a gun with him when he went away, and in reply to my question, is that gun loaded? He said yes. They went away across Hare Hill Field in the direction of the Red Barn. I saw neither one of them afterwards that night, and I have not seen Maria since. I did see Corder on the following Monday in Polstead. I said to him, William, what have you done with Maria? And he said, I've left her in Ipswich, I've got her a comfortable place, she's going down with Miss Rowland to the waterside. I asked which way they went to Ipswich, and he said by Stratford. I then said, where did she dress? And he replied, she put her things on in the barn, then put the greatcoat over them to protect her, and took her off into the carriage, where they were on their way to Ipswich. My husband and I have been afraid for some time that Maria might have been taken up. The last thing I saw when she went away on the 18th was that she was crying, and wearing the handkerchief that was found around her neck.
Much of the case was built upon her testimony. She was able to relate her version of events with exceptional recall. Despite her highly detailed testimony, the defence failed to challenge her alleged dream or make any attempt to discredit her. Finally, it was William Corder's turn to testify.
I'm now resolved to disclose the truth, regardless of the consequences. There was a pair of small pistols in the bedroom. Maria knew they were there. I'd often shown them to her. But Maria took them away from me. I had some reason to suspect she had some correspondence with a gentleman by whom she had a child with in London. Though her conduct was not free of blemish, I at length yielded to her entreaties and agreed to marry her. Gentlemen, this is the origin of the fatal occurrence. As we proceeded across the field to the barn, which I beg you to bear in mind was a place where...
Is this how you think you should conduct yourself towards me? Who's willing to do what must be done to make you happy?
Are you really in such misery for marrying me?
I care nothing for you! You're only ashamed for me that you won't even take me to your mother's!
But when we're married...
Your mother and family will have nothing to do with me! How can I ever be happy?
I will try my best.
You ain't shown me the regard that Peter Matthews has for me.
Then let Peter Matthews marry you! If you are to go on this way after we're married...
Where are you going?
Returning to my home.
Would you not marry me?
I must resolve not to marry before it's too late. You may act as you think proper.
I had scarcely proceeded to the other gate of the barnyard when I heard a loud report like that of a gun or a pistol. I immediately ran back and to my horror found the unhappy girl on the ground apparently dead. Overwhelmed by my own feeling at the awful event, I stood for some moments in a state of complete stupefaction. I endeavoured to raise her from the ground in hope of affording her relief, but to my horror found she was altogether lifeless. I then placed the body on the ground and perceived the fatal weapon. To add to my terror, I discovered it to be one of the pistols which I had kept loaded. The danger of my situation now flashed upon my mind. There lay the unfortunate girl, wounded to death by an instrument belonging to me. My faculties seemed suspended. I knew not what to do. The instant this mischief happened, I thought to make it public. But this would have added to the suspicion, and I resolved to conceal her death, giving sometimes one reason for her absence, and sometimes another.
Corder's impassioned speech left the whole courtroom silent for several moments. He didn't look up as the judge, Lord Chief Alexander Barron, began his summing up, saying,
I admit I have found the case against the accused formidable and his explanation unconvincing. But should you have any doubt at all about the accused's guilt, then you must give him the benefit of the doubt. If not, then you must, without fear for the consequences, bring in a verdict of guilty.
Despite purely circumstantial evidence or any explanation why Corder would have impaled Maria's body, it took the jury just 35 minutes to reach a verdict of guilty. No one even considered that the many wounds in Maria's body could have been caused by Thomas Marten spiking down in search of his dead daughter. William Corder, it is now my painful duty to announce to you the close of your mortal career. The sentence is that you be taken back to the prison and that you be taken thence on Monday to the place of execution and there hanged by the neck till you are dead, and that your body shall afterwards be dissected and anatomized, and the Lord God Almighty have mercy on your soul. Sentence was passed on the Friday, and on the Monday, the 9th of August, William Corder was hanged at Bury St Edmunds Jail before a crowd of 7,000. Within a few hours of the execution, a penny broadsheet was distributed, alleged to publish the final confession of William Corder, supposedly given in jail at the behest of 2 prison chaplains and witnessed by John Orridge, the governor of the jail. It claimed Corder admitted,
I acknowledged being guilty of the death of poor Maria Marten by shooting her with a pistol. When we left her father's, we began quarrelling about the burial of the child. Inside the barn, a scuffle ensued, and at the time I think that she had hold of me. I took the pistol from my pocket and fired. She fell and died in an instant. I began to dig a hole to bury the body. I think I dragged the body by the handkerchief that was around her neck. I hope through the mercy of God to be forgiven.
If the confession is true, it fails to answer certain questions, such as how Maria's body came to be impaled to the ground by an iron spike. Nor does the confession explain how Anne Marten came to have a sure knowledge where the body was hidden. The authenticity of the confession remains in doubt. There have been other theories offered how Maria was murdered. One theory suggests William only wounded Maria with a pistol, and after he fled in a panic, Samuel Smith, who had been observing unnoticed, finished off the job. In a similar theory, Maria only pretended she would kill herself when William told her that he would not marry her. She accidentally pulled the trigger, but did not die until Smith came in and stabbed her to death. It suggested that when arrested, Corder was too afraid of Smith to implicate him, and so went to the gallows innocent of any crime. Well, perhaps. Frankly, neither of those two theories holds water. Opinion today seems fairly evenly split between William being the lone killer and others being responsible for Maria's death.
I know she'd had many lovers. There might have been 1 or 2 people there who were querying their togetherness, maybe, and then maybe a kind of melee followed, and in the middle of it, something was shot, and she died.
I don't see that anyone else had a reason necessarily to kill her. I'm not even sure what his motive was entirely, but obviously something happened between them that night. Whether he went there intending to kill her, I think is another question. I think he did kill her.
I don't think that we can point the finger at poor old Corder.
Possibly a sort of a moment of passion, perhaps a flaming row, a gun hanging around there somewhere.
The legend of the Red Barn murder revolves around Maria's mythical reputation as an innocent village girl. She certainly wasn't innocent, and by the standards of the day, she was a bad girl. But all she wanted was a better life, and that included pretty dresses. She learned that there were men who were prepared to buy them for her. I suppose she was selfish, naive, and not too bright. But I don't think she was the wicked girl her stepmother painted her to be. And what of William Corder? Surely a complex man you can't make out to be either all villain or all victim. He was weak-willed when it came to women and easily led by them. He thought himself better than a mere farmer. He aspired to be a man of literature. He was academically gifted, but not a man with a lot of common sense. Otherwise, he might have at least changed his name when he started a new life and married Mary Moore. He remains an enigma. But at least one man remained unconvinced that Corder murdered Maria, Thomas Wainwright.
I find it hard to believe he was a cold and calculating murderer. It would have surprised me far less to have learned that some woman had actually killed him.
Almost immediately, the story of Maria Marten's murder in the Red Barn was being told in fairgrounds, peep shows, plays and novels. Between 1902 and 1935, there were no less than 5 films, most of them depicting Maria as the young village maiden and Corder the evil old squire. Corder's body was not buried, but dissected. A death mask was made, which people often believe is an exact likeness of Corder. But his head was given a grotesque appearance, which was a byproduct of the hanging, and led to the grotesque illustrations of Corder sketched after his death. His skeleton was used as a teaching aid before finally being reclaimed in 2004 by the family and cremated. His skin was tanned and used to cover a book about the case. But William would not rest, and each May his spirit was seen by many, including the owners of Maria Marten's cottage.
Well, we not just us, but many people who slept in the west part of the house from May onwards, would hear footsteps outside, round about midnight. Ha ha, it sounds like one of the Grimm stories. But not just us. I have seen silhouette, which when challenged just vanished. May, June, when the light is later, 10:30, 11. And my husband has seen something once. He'd come out of the house because we were having a musical party and he didn't want the neighbors to be disturbed, and he saw this silhouette coming towards him, and when he challenged it, it vanished.
There was a strange consequence to his body being reclaimed.
Until he was buried, there was always sighting and people hearing and people seeing. Not just us, a lot of people. We've never heard or seen anybody since.
The murder in the Red Barn was the most sensational homicide case of the early 19th century, but the secret to what actually happened in the Red Barn died with Anne Marten. Unless one is prepared to accept that she had the gift of prophecy, she had another reason for knowing that Maria was dead and where she was buried.
Part of the story that everybody knows is that the stepmother dreamt that the body was buried in the Red Barn, and lo and behold, there it was, buried in the Red Barn.
This is a part of the story that still ignites suspicion about Anne Marten.
They found the body because the stepmother said that she had a dream that Maria was buried in the barn, so they went and looked and found the body. But she had not a great connection with her stepmother, so why would her stepmother dream about her stepdaughter that she's not that interested in and magically find the place where the body's buried? So it's a bit suspect.
Anne certainly did have nightmares, as Maria's sister Annie testified.
She says, Mariah's coming for her, knock, knock, knocking at the door.
It was Anne Marten's remarkably detailed testimony which formed the basis of the story of the murder in the Red Barn, including how William insisted that Maria was still alive and well after she was killed. But if Anne was lying, why?
Perhaps she just got carried away with being the centre of attention and the limelight in court and just told a story. It wouldn't be the first time that had happened.
But what if there is another reason? What if Anne, wanting the better life Maria had seemed destined for, had set her sights on Corder and had become the weak-willed Corder's secret lover and now hoped to become his wife? We have only her word for what actually happened at the Marten cottage the day Maria and William left for the Red Barn. What if the jealous Anne had followed them to the Red Barn, discovered Maria's failed suicide attempt, and finished her off? Later on the witness stand, Corder might have protected the woman who had believed he would return to take her away, until she discovered Corder had married Mary Moore. Could Anne on the witness stand have wrought revenge on William for marrying another? But that still leaves the question of the iron spike in Maria's body. Throughout Europe, it was believed that to prevent a deceased person of evil character from rising from their grave, an iron stake had to be driven through the corpse, impaling it to the ground in its grave. Clearly somebody had impaled Maria's corpse to stop her from rising from her shallow grave. Anne thought Maria to be a singularly wicked girl, and she alone dreamt that Maria had risen from the grave to come for her. Many believe Anne Marten collaborated in some way or another, and certainly helped to bury her.
I think it was Corder in cahoots with Maria's stepmother.
I think that the stepmother was involved because she dreamt that where the body was. So she dreamt this, and that's how the police were informed. And it never came up in any of the court case or anything. It never mentioned that actually that's how the body was located, which I thought was really strange.
If she was involved in any way in disguising the body, then once you've got something to hide, you start inventing. You carry on inventing, don't you? Perhaps it all got out of hand, but then once she said it in court, she can't take any of it back.
The question remains, was Anne Marten complicit in or even responsible for Maria's murder in the Red Barn? Or was this really the strange case of a murder revealed in a nightmare?